Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this Monday edition of The Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko. On the show tonight,
sonke sinamaphupho sifuna ukuphila impilo engcono sifuna ukwazi ukuthi ukuhlala emjondolo akusiyona into ejwayelekile sifuna ukuvula amanzi ekseni aphume empompini sifuna ukuthi abantwana bethu bangafundi ngekhandla.
we speak to the isiZulu speaking, colorful and charming mayor-elect of Umgeni municipality, who has captured the imagination of so many South Africans. Chris Pappas takes us through his journey. But before that interview, we'll take a closer look at the Human Rights Commission's investigative hearings into the July riots that left 354 people dead. The Watchdog starts now. The South African Human Rights Commission today began investigative hearings into the July riots that left 354 people dead. Several witnesses appeared at today's inaugural session, recounting their frightening experiences. Among them, Zama Nguse, who told of how security guards shot her 17-year-old nephew in Raysthorpe informal settlement in Pietermaritzburg. To talk us through the process, what and who to expect, as well as the whole point of it all, let's welcome the Commission's CEO, Advocate Sidiso Tipanyane. Advocates, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. Let's start with the point of this exercise. Why did the Commission feel there was a need to conduct these hearings?
Good evening to you and to your viewers. Certainly the unrest led to massive human rights violations in the form of lost lives and property, but also it undermined our economy quite severely, which is required for us to be able to advance human rights properly. So the Commission has a mandate, to find appropriate redress where there's been human rights violations. So we're having this hearing basically to get to the bottom of these issues, find out exactly what happened and the extent of the problem, and therefore what role should be played by all relevant organs of state to basically address these problems. Mm-hmm. So today basically we're having the victims from Pietermaritzburg, whose settlement was basically torched as a result of the unrest, and a few people died there and also got injured. So we need to find a way of helping this situation, but make sure that it never happens again, because you'll appreciate basically this shook our democracy as South Africans.
Mm-hmm. And who have you approached and asked to come before the Commission?
Well, this week is basically, an opportunity for the victims to relate their experiences. And then the following week, we'll be calling organs of state, the Minister of Police, Minister of State Security, the Presidency, Minister of Defense, Minister of Justice, NPA, the Hawks, all basically, organs of state which played a role in this matter. Because one of the problems, which is very clear, was that, there was an absence of policing, which also, saw this incidents happening, but also the response of government in dealing with the problems has also been questionable. So we really want to find out, from the state, what happened, what went wrong, and therefore what are the plans going forward to make sure, the violations are addressed, but second, but more importantly, that this never really happens again, but also to address the underlying factors, what has led our people to basically resort to this kind of behavior, which has really caused so much damage in our country. Probably one of the worst incidents as far as loss of life is concerned in our country since 1994.
Mm-hmm. One would imagine you didn't, go into these hearings that began today cold. You would have done some preliminary work, gathered some evidence. What have you found or been able to, glean from whatever research or initial or preliminary conversations you may have had with anybody?
Yeah. One of the worrying strands, which is actually coming out now, is the racial violence, which led, to the killings in Phoenix as well as in Pietermaritzburg, where members of the community who themselves, to a large extent, were victims of the looting, took the law into their hands and ended up, causing this kind of problems. But secondly, of course, the massive extent of looting and destruction of property, of state property, as well as individuals, which also has to be addressed. But thirdly, then in a country where we have values, we have to respect the rights of others. What led to all this happen? And we're of course quite clear that the underlying factors in this, which are behind these issues of unemployment, poverty, but also there were certainly people, who were basically fueling this the issue for their own political agendas. And we want the state to basically deal with those people and make sure that, these things never happen again. But secondly, who's going to compensate people for the massive loss which they have been cared through this unrest?
Mm-hmm. Now, can anybody who has information approach the commission, or have you targeted very specific people? Let's begin with the victims before we get to the state agencies that you refer to. Is it a free for all? Anyone can come as long as you feel you have something to say.
Yes, we have called for public submissions, and then we will decide, whom we can call for oral presentation. But we've also identified a number of organs of state which we think can throw some light into this. But we're also looking at a number of academics and researchers who can also, from their own experiences, also throw more light into this matter, so that we can then be able to make recommendations which will basically address the problems going forward. So anybody is available. Everybody is free to make submissions to the commission, give evidence, then we'll deal with it accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did you choose the state agencies? Are you focused only on the justice and criminal sector?
Well, since this was really more of an issue which affect the criminal justice agencies, the police, NPA, justice, defense, intelligence, those are people who also want to come forward and explain. But as we are going through the hearing, it's also quite clear that there are people who need social support in terms of counseling. Victims of the violence. What kind of support are they getting? What about relief? So again, the role of social development, local government will also be important. So it's basically we're looking at any stakeholder who can actually help us to find a solution on this matter going forward.
And from the academic side, presumably NGOs as well, what kinds of, which disciplines are you specifically targeting?
Well, basically social scientists, political scientists to help us. So basically, if you'll recall, we also want to look at the underlying factors behind the violence. Apart from issues of law enforcement, why did ordinary South Africans get caught in this kind of a phenomena, which caused so much damage to our country? And we need to understand that and come up with recommendations to avoid that. But at the same time, why was there a failure of law enforcement? Did the police know? And if they knew, how come they didn't prevent this thing? And where are the shortfalls? And what should be done differently? Again, the issue of the economy. What are the factors around unemployment and poverty? And then what are the best ways of also dealing with these issues? At the same time, those who were involved in the looting, how then do we deal with those? There are many of them. So what is the role of the state in identifying those who are responsible for the looting, and then making sure that the rule of law is upheld.
Now, what is the Commission's approach? In other words, I mean, you would have seen or heard around the state capture inquiry, for example, some of the witnesses felt that the evidence leaders were hostile and they were not given a fair chance. Some witnesses were treated a lot more kindly, whereas others didn't get the same treatment. What is the approach from the Commission's point of view?
Well, we are a human rights organization and we have to treat everyone with respect in terms of their dignity. Our act also requires us to act in good faith. That's why, the Constitution says the Commission must do its work without fear or favor or prejudice. So we cannot be prejudiced in terms of how we conduct our work. It's really about, finding the root cause of the problems. But also, we want to bring about social cohesion. We want to make sure that the groups, which found themselves on different sides of the equation over this violence, are able to reconcile and live again in a much more harmonious and peaceful manner. And again, as we saw today, at the tail end of the hearing, there were people also from the community, which is seen as, as being perpetrators of the violence, who actually helped, to build houses in Pietermaritzburg, to provide support. So basically, one can see already the beginnings again of healing and reconciliation in our country, which we need, because this has basically divided our people in terms of class and race and many other things. And we need to heal those divisions as quickly as possible.
I mean, as you said earlier, I mean, this was informed by, the mandates of the Commission. But what, more specifically, what are the terms of reference that you've put out or put together for this particular inquiry?
Well, the terms of reference really for us is to find out what were the root causes, identify the violations, and make recommendations to find appropriate redress to the violations, but also then, come up with the recommendations to make sure this thing never happens again. So those are our broad terms of reference. We're looking for evidence which will then help us as a commission to be able to formulate recommendations and make findings. Now, remember, our view is that our findings are binding, and therefore they should be respected unless challenged in the court of law. So when we make findings, we make recommendations, then we expect the government and anybody else to implement those recommendations of the Commission.
What has been the experience previously when you've done similar inquiries? Have you found the people you may have found, negatively against actually complying with the recommendations, or have you had challenges?
Yeah, there is a constitutional obligation in terms of the Constitution for all organs of state to assist the Commission and uphold its integrity. It's also a criminal offense for anyone to ignore or undermine the work of the Commission. However, I must say, looking at our hearings in Val, Alexander, and Hammanskraal, there's definitely an increasing level of cooperation by organs of state to, not to ignore recommendations, but to actually try and implement that. But remember, we have the powers that if people ignore our recommendations, then we can go to court and get a contempt of court order if we want to. But there is a requirement by all organs of state in the Constitution to basically respect the Commission and uphold its dignity and integrity.
And how long are the hearings going to take, Advocate? How much time have you set aside for it?
The physical hearings will take 3 weeks. But as you say, we've been calling for submissions. We've hired a number of researchers who will look into all these things and then advise the panel, as to what kind of recommendations and findings should be made. Hopefully by end of March, we have done. And we're very grateful that Treasury also allowed us to, give us some money to be able to conduct this hearing in this manner.
And just from the sort of initial work that has gone into this and the time frames you've set for yourselves, and I'm asking this again, going back to your state capture inquiry, they realized, midway through the process that actually we need more time, and more time meant more money, and, they had to go back and forth looking for money and so on. Are you confident that, within the 3 weeks will be sufficient, and whatever Treasury is giving you will also be sufficient? Okay, we seem to be having a problem with that line just as we're about to conclude that interview. But we're going to take a quick ad break and try and re-establish that line and conclude that conversation. Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, we are in conversation with Advocate Tsidiso Tipanyane. He is the CEO of the South African Human Rights Commission. Now, today, they began the investigative hearings into the July riots that left 354 people dead. Advocate, before that line gave us trouble, I was about to ask you about just broadly, the state of human rights in South Africa today. How would you describe, the situation as it stands? Are we doing well? Do we have problems?
Well, there are lots of problems as far as issues of poverty, unemployment, increasing inequalities between the rich and the poor, the issues of violence, especially against women and children. But at the same time, I still think we have strong institutions like our courts, bodies like us, Auditor General, Public Protector, which are still fighting, for a better future. We also have a strong civil society and media. So even though there are problems, there's still a commitment to address these problems. You look at the unrest we're talking about now. I think it actually have gone quite bad. But fortunately, it was only confined to 2 provinces. It was very clear signal that our people were saying, no ways, we're not going to allow whoever is behind these issues to undermine our country democracy, and it will stop here. And I think we need to be very grateful for our people that, despite the damage and the loss of lives which happened in July, it didn't go all over the country, which therefore shows that, there's still a commitment amongst our people to really fight for a better country. The other issue, of course, is the problems around local government, issues of water and sanitation, which might also have led to people, not voting adequately. The same problems we're seeing now with load shedding, which is also another problem. That, some of us are even arguing that actually electricity should be seen as a human right. And therefore, government should do better because, without electricity, not much rights can be realized. And this also undermines economic growth in our country, which we need as well. So there are lots of problems, but at the same time, I think there's commitment really for us to keep on fighting. So I don't think our country is collapsing despite the problems. And I think, most South Africans are getting increasingly committed, to take a stand and fight against these problems. The other issues of course, issues of corruption, which is also damaging our economy a great deal. And again, that we also have to fight a lot more. It is also linked, of course, again, to our problems around finding a better protection for whistleblowers, who we need to fight corruption in our country.
What would you say are the contributing factors to this less than ideal situation we're finding ourselves in your analysis?
Well, look, we inherited a system basically which was anti-human rights, where there was very little accountability. But also we've gone through a lot of trauma as a people, and I don't think we were able to address the traumatic effects of oppression adequately, issues of poverty, unemployment, inequality. And therefore, these things are playing up, Hence, we have very high levels of violence in our country. We also have very high levels of corruption. And we need to do a lot more to fight these issues. So it's a carryover from the past, but also I think we didn't really strengthen our institutions properly. The role of Parliament could be better. Public servants might need to be more committed, and be servants of the people, not looters and people who just undermine our democracy. So I think it's a combination of many things, but clearly there's still light at the end of the tunnel from where we stand with bodies like ourselves, the media, and everybody else. So we're not throwing our arms up in the air. We're fighting for a better South Africa.
What could institutions like Parliament, which you specifically mentioned, do, for instance, to improve the situation? Well, where are they lacking?
Well, I think Parliament could do a bit better in holding the executive to account, making sure that those who are responsible for delivery are doing their work, those who are stealing our monies are brought to book. At the same time, there should also be greater support for bodies like ourselves. But also, I think it's very important, at the end of the day, it's our country. And I think we as South Africans, as ordinary people, need to also, play a bigger role in ensuring that, there is better governance in our country. Also, make proper decisions as to whom we appoint, into these bodies, so that they can do the work properly. So I think, it requires both sides, we as the citizens to make sure that we put into government people who do the work properly and we hold them to account, but also those who get into government really go there in order to serve the people in the country and not loot.
What do bodies like you still need? What do you mean? What are you missing? Still, what kind of support does the South African Human Rights Commission require, for example, to do its job better?
Well, we require our people, to get more involved in this project. The project of human rights cannot just be that of the Human Rights Commission. It's all our project. We're just a small factor in the picture. But certainly we also as a commission, can also do a little bit more better in becoming more effective, in becoming more efficient, and making sure that, we use our powers accordingly as well as public resources accordingly. So, we're only 25 years old, and there's a lot of work which still needs to be done in that regard.
Advocate Tipanyane, thank you very much for your time this evening. He is the CEO of the South African Human Rights Commission. Today, they began hearings into the July riots we saw in parts of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng that left 354 people dead. Several people came before the commission today. The process is expected to last about 3 weeks or so. Various categories of people have been and will continue to be invited, including the victims, but also, as the advocate was saying, state law enforcement agencies about what was or wasn't done. They will also be calling on academics with expert knowledge on a whole range of areas to also come forward and advise. And once everything is done, the commission will, of course, look at the evidence they will have. They will also be able to make recommendations, which, as the advocate was saying, are in fact binding. We'll see what comes out of this particular process. After the break, who's this man who has captured the hearts and minds of South Africans on social media? Umgeni Mayor's Mayor-elect Chris Pappas is my next guest. My next guest has captured the imagination of many South Africans. He is the mayor-elect of Umgeni municipalities, whose videos many of you would have seen doing the rounds on social media, like this one. Okay, we seem to have a problem with that clip. Hopefully we'll be able to replay it at some point during the course of this interview. But he speaks fluent isiZulu, has an amazing sense of humor, and is about to lead the first DA-run municipality in KwaZulu-Natal. But who's this guy? Most of us have only seen on social media. Well, joining us on the line from KwaZulu-Natal, please welcome Umgeni Municipality's Mayor-elect Chris Pappas. Chris, kunjani mfowethu?
Siyaphila babunjani?
Siyaphila nathi. Are you surprised at how people have been reacting to your videos?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've spoken isiZulu my whole life, so now that it's out there, now it's a phenomenon. But yeah, I was taken aback. But I think the people that know me have always had the same reaction to it. So it's nice that other people know now that I can.
Where did you learn the language?
So I grew up in the rural areas of KZN. So my upbringing was mainly with children who spoke isiZulu as a first language. So it was the inevitable adapt or die type scenario. Speak the local language or don't speak at all.
Where was this? Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
In Moy River in KZN. So there's a small town there along the highway where the protests always start and the trucks are always burned. But there's also some good that comes out of Moy River, and I grew up in a small area called Flatikulu near a place called Dabamhlope.
And why was it a do or die? I think why did you feel a need to survive and
Well, I don't think it was a need to survive. It was just what you grew up, knowing. When you're playing with children and you're growing up together, you end up, speaking together. So, I taught people English, people taught me Zulu, and when people ask, did you learn Zulu? I said, well, no. Did people learn their first language at home? And it becomes that sort of a debate. So I don't ever remember learning Zulu apart from reading and writing it at school. But to actually speak it was something that I did because I just did.
But what kind of a setup was it? Tell us, where you grew up. Is it a town environment? Is it semi-rural? Is it
So I grew up on a farm out towards Giant's Castle. But yes, Moy River is a very small town, so regardless of the farm, whether you live on the farm or in the small town, isiZulu is something that people would speak because you're engaging with people in that small setting.
Your introduction to politics, how did that come about?
So I don't come from a political family. My father often asked me the question when if I'm becoming a chairman of something. I became the party's deputy leader in KZN. He always asked me, does it come with a pay increase? And the answer is usually no. And he doesn't always understand that because, he's a business-minded person. But I don't come from a political family. I was first introduced to politics at the University of Pretoria, where I got involved in COPE, Congress of the People, the student movement there, and I served on the SRC under that organization.
And when was this?
This was, when was the World Cup? 2010, so back from about 2010 onwards to 2014.
And from COPE, where did you go to?
From COPE, I sort of got, they took me out of campus, the guys who I was with, to go and meet some of the regional leaders and the chairperson in COPE. But there was always a lot of conflict and there was never a lot of organization happening there. So I got a bit despondent with politics at that stage. But I was living in a DA ward at the time and I thought, well, let me find a little bit more. And I got involved with a lady by the name of Siobhan Miller. I think she's still a councillor in Pretoria and Tshwane. And she gave me things to read and she got me involved. I manned registration tables, put up posters and the rest of it, and slowly got involved in politics that way. I then got my first job outside of university, which was as a development economist. So I let go of politics a bit. But I had certain moral and ethical issues with that particular job. And I started looking for another one and saw an opening in KZN as an operations manager for the DA. And I applied. And I was recruited then by Tembiso Ngema and Diane Kohler-Barnard, who were the heads at that particular time. It was a funny story. Tembiso actually phoned me because they put my CV aside because they were looking for someone who could work particularly in the Umlazi area. And obviously, if you couldn't understand people in that area, the majority language, it would be a bit difficult. But on my CV, it said fluent in isiZulu. And, Sthembiso said, no, let's phone this guy and double check. So I got a random phone call from a guy I'd never met asking me questions in Zulu. And because I was polite, I answered him and then he put down the phone. I later learned that it was him and they were busy testing whether or not my CV was correct.
But I mean, you're not the only one. The outgoing mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay has a similar sort of history. I mean, came to DA from, COPE, and previously he was with the ANC. But what attracted you to COPE? Let's start there before we can then talk about then from COPE to DA. Why were you attracted to COPE?
So when I was on campus, I mean, the guys came up to me and they told me about their vision for what they wanted to do for the students of the campus. They told me about the organization that they came from, and they told me about what they stood for. And COPE was still new at that time, so I'd heard a little bit about it in the news, and I knew that it was largely, the visions and the values were similar to where I am now. So it wasn't something that was distant from where I am. I also think at that particular time, I know at school I was, there were some people who picked on me for having more black friends than white friends. I remember at one stage there was an election poster of Thabo Mbeki nailed to my door, which was just, your school type bullying. But, ANC and COPE were similar, but it was the better version of the ANC, and it was, without all the problems. So, being fresh to politics, I gravitated towards that. But I think more than that was the opportunity that I was going to be given to try and make a difference in people's lives, because I was going to be given the academic affairs portfolio, and I had a task there to achieve a number of things, including opening up the library 24 hours, making sure that there was free Wi-Fi for students, providing buses to those students who lived in the center of town and usually had to travel late at night, and there was obviously crime issues there. So that is where it all started. And I mean, there were great guys in COPE at that time. They were very passionate about bringing change. SASCO on campus was very militant and was not something that I wanted. And I think perhaps maybe at that stage, if DASO had come to me, I also would have gravitated towards them. But being fresh to politics and seeing those guys' vision, that's where I went.
And you don't think that COPE and now the DA are ideologically far apart?
No, not so much. I mean, I don't think they are that far apart. We often go into coalition with COPE in different municipalities. So I think the vision and the values of the organizations are largely similar. We may differ in the way that we want to do things or get things done. But at that time, that it was something that I could believe in. We were speaking the same language. We wanted the same things. And there seemed to just be a difference in color on that particular campus. I mean, logo colors.
I want us to talk about Umgeni next and what your plans are, where you hope to take the municipality. But we want to take a quick ad break before we do that, so that we can also re-establish your line, which is giving us a bit of a problem right now. We are speaking to Umgeni Municipality's Mayor-elect, Chris Pappas. That conversation continues in a short while. Don't go away.
Kunomuntu osebenza lana uthi ngizosibangela umsindo ngithi awusiyeke vele nobamba amacingo wenu andabamba amafoni umsindo wethu awunakile nje la ngaphakathi ngomhla ka-1 November nini nizoba amasosha azoletha ushintsho la Msunduzi noma uhlale ePhelen Sweetwater noma uhlale eRubio Montrose noma uhlale eManobe suburbs ushintsho luyeza eMsunduzi akisafuna. Kungani abantu abasha fanele baphile ngo-350? Kungani abantu abasha fanele bakhangazela ama-food parcel? Asiyoni intuthuko leyo, akithi siyabonga. Asifuni ukuphila ngamaVatikani. Kodwa lo hulumeni kaKhongolose uthi uzosinakelela, usinakekela ngawo lamaVatikani nama-food parcel. City, enough is enough. We are tired. We are tired. Phuma ensephuma. Ngomhla 1 November sizothatha umshadelo njenge-DA. Sikhiphe ukuselesele labo. Ngoba njengabantu abasha sifuna ikusasa elingcono. Asifuni ukuphila sibizwa ngamaphara. Iyona into abayithanda. Bayathanda leyo nto. Abantwana bethu ngosungulu nogogo ngithi bakhona ogogo sibabonele bakhona. Abasungulu bababiza ngamaphara ngoba bahlulekile ukuthi bathule umsebenzi. Okwamanje kunendawo lana eMsunduzi akhanye for insuku eziwu-4. Kodwa bazothi bayahola. Abaholi bahola imali kuphela, abaholi ukuthi bahola imali kuphela. Ngomhla 1 ma-Democrats fanele siphume ngobuningi benu. Noma uhlala siphi wathi ezimbali noma uhlalaphi. Wonke umuntu lana uzothatha abantu abawu-10 lokho bavotisa i-Democratic Alliance.
Chris Pappas, Umgeni's mayor-elect, is our guest this evening. Now, your first meeting, bit of drama. What happened there? Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself, Chris. Chris, please unmute yourself. Okay, we'll have to take another quick break in order to re-establish that line. Chris Pappas, the mayor-elect of Umgeni municipality, is our guest. We're about to talk about his plans for that municipality. Chris Pappas, the mayor-elect of Umgeni municipality, is my guest. I hope, Chris, you can hear me now and technology is cooperating. What are your plans? You're saying in that clip we played earlier that you hope to bring change to that municipality. What exactly do you plan to do?
Yes, so that rally was actually in Pietermaritzburg in Msunduzi. I was there attending as part of my duties as deputy leader. But I mean, change is change, and it's the neighboring municipality. So what we want to do here in Umgeni is 5 simple things: is bring back what local government is supposed to be about. And the first is, waste management in the environment. Our communities live in filth, and we need to clean that up. We want to make sure that we have jobs in a growing economy. We want to make sure that our people can find opportunities through a growing economy, and that we attract investment by having a stable government that is able to deliver services. The next thing we want to do is invest in infrastructure. So our roads, our street lights, stormwater, water, electricity, the basics that local government is supposed to deliver. We want to make sure that we focus on those and that we prioritize those things so that we have a stable foundation to build the other things that we want, such as houses, jobs, and the social services that we need to then offer. We want to have a transparent and a responsive government. So we want to make sure that government is not far away from the people and unreachable, that you don't have to stand in endless queues and make endless appointments to be able to get your services delivered, and modernize our municipality. Why are we still using paper-based systems when we can modernize and make things a lot quicker? Why are people standing in endless queues when we can have online booking systems to make certain parts of what we do quicker? And transparency is important. A lot of what we've seen over the years has all been hidden. So it's a government that runs in the shadows with contracts that we never see where they go, and the money is not accounted for. So we want to make sure that the basics of what people expect from their government are done right. And we ran a campaign like that. We didn't promise people the heavens and the earth. We said we want to do what you want government to do, and that is to be responsive to your needs at a local government level. So there's water in the taps, and there's the lights work when you turn them on, and that you don't have to walk home at night in the dark because all the street lights don't work. And that resonated with people. generally there's a lot of noise out in politics. There's always some controversy in the media, or there's always some some political analyst has got some view on something that then becomes headlines. And what we forget is that people actually want to know how they're going to put bread on the table. People want to know how are they going to pay their bills. Grandparents want to know, are my grandchildren going to be safe when I leave this earth one day? And that is what people want to hear. And that usually gets mixed up in the noise. And we manage to plow through that and talk to people in their homes, in their communities, about issues that were important to them. And we plan on upholding those promises that we made to people. We know there will be challenges, and we know that we won't get everything right. That's how things work. But we have to be honest and transparent at all times and bring people into our confidence. And the public is generally understanding when you can say, this is how far we are, and this is what we still want to do.
What is your analysis of what brought about the crisis you described? What is responsible for the way things are at the moment?
Institutionalized corruption, the deployment of people who are unqualified and unskilled to places where they shouldn't be. So, the idea of fit for purpose or merit-based employment. The lack of consequence management. So, yes, and it doesn't matter what political party you're from, the world over, there's going to be corrupt people or people who do the wrong thing. But the important thing is what you do when you find those people. But we live in a system now, a society where there is no consequence management and accountability. You sort of just get moved around and put in different places as you mess up wherever you go. So yeah, it's institutionalized corruption. It's nepotism and cadre deployment, if you want to call it that. And it's the lack of accountability and consequence management. And over time, that has slowly eroded the institutions that are supposed to deliver to the people. So you have this institution called local government that is supposed to be a mechanism for rolling out services, but it's not that anymore. It's become an employment agency and a place where people go to retire, or otherwise where they go to line their pockets. And the basic services slowly get less and less, but expenditure gets more and more, which is a strange phenomenon.
Obviously there's going to be a lot of pushback from your political rivals, but also the officials, what as we saw during the drama, that characterized your very first meeting.
Absolutely. You don't have a hegemony of political power for so long and then break that and expect things are going to go smoothly. But it's something that we expected and that we're planning for. But also when you've had such corruption and when you've had such abuse of power, those who know that they're in the wrong and those who know that there are consequences coming will try by all means to try and prevent that, or at least frustrate that. And that's why we had Mrs. Tribane come back here, who's the suspended municipal manager, to try and frustrate that process. But at the end of the day, we are not just a political party of opposition. We are a political party that has taken over governments from the ANC in particular before. We've defeated the ANC in their shenanigans in Gauteng, where they tried to take over Tshwane. So we're used to this behavior. And as one of my activists said today, it's the last kicks of a dying horse, if we use that analogy. And we will overcome, and we will start to clean up this government slowly. It's not a witch hunt. It's not. We're not coming to impose our will on the administration of people. We want to work with people. There are good public servants who want to get the job done, and for years have not got the tools to do so, the budget, or have just been politically frustrated. And we've had a lot of those people come to us and say, please, can we just get on with the job now? And those are the people that we want to work with. But we have sent a clear warning to those people who have dipped their fingers in the pot for far too long, and those people who have defended corruption. There will be consequences, and we cannot let that go unchecked.
Should the officials, they be worried that because politically the municipality has changed hands, now the new guys will come under the guise of a cleanup and actually make their lives miserable?
No, not at all. If you are a dedicated public servant and you're there because you want to do the job, you're there for the right reasons, and you do your work transparently, openly, and honestly, then there's nothing to be worried about. Governments come and go, political parties change, but the municipal officials, for the most part, stay. But again, there are those people who are there because they are politically connected. There are those people who are there because they are a brother or an uncle of whoever, and they are there to channel resources in a particular direction. Those are the people that need to be worried. And if you are a hard-working, honest government official who puts the people first, then you have nothing to worry about. The only people that have to worry are the criminals.
How did you, in your, whatever you put into it, what would you ascribe your success? In other words, pulling this one off. Now the DA has, is running a municipality in KwaZulu-Natal for the very first time, and you took over, or you're taking over from a political party that was actually strong. What went into your strategy, in this election?
So I think that if, as political parties, we actually listen to the criticisms of the general public, then we will solve a lot of our own problems in terms of running campaigns. And the first one was, we only hear from political parties during elections. So our campaign didn't start when the Constitutional Court ruled that elections must take place. We started this campaign in 2019, and as far back even as 2004, when we actually realized we could win Mngeni. But in 2019, we sat down and said, what can we do better? What have we done wrong in the past? And how can we do better? But there was a number of other things. We built a hypothetical wall around this municipality, and we said, what, it doesn't matter what noise is happening in Johannesburg or what's happening on the borders or all those sorts of things. What's important is that when people walk out of their homes, it's filthy. When people drive to work, it's riddled with potholes. And that's what people want to hear about. They want to know, who are you guys and what are you going to do to fix the problems that we experience every day? And we spent 2 years telling people about that. But I think one of the critical parts of our campaign, especially amongst new voters to the DA, so to black voters in the townships and the rural areas, was to break down all the propaganda that is out there about us. The DA is going to take away your social grant. The DA is going to take your RDP house. Every poor person is going to have to pay for services. The DA is going to bring back apartheid. All this propaganda that is just fear-mongering that is put out by opponents. We had to start with that, because you cannot build trust amongst new voters if you have not addressed that. So a lot of what we did in different communities was about educating people, but building trust at the same time, to say, we come from we drink the same water, we drive on the same roads, we have the same problems. So why can we not work together to solve that? And I think that message resonated with the communities of the Mngeni municipality.
Going forward, do you aspire for higher, offices and perhaps even lead the DA one day?
I'm quite content trying to lead the Mngeni municipality. That is going to be a difficult task. And it is at this particular point of power that I can bring the biggest change to people's lives. So I want to be the best mayor that I can be. I want my team to be the best team that they can be. And I want this municipality to be the best that they can be. And if that takes 10 years, then that takes 10 years. So no, I'm concentrating on the here and now. And the future is something we'll look at in the future.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much for your time, and best of luck with running that municipality.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Chris Papas, who is the mayor of Mngeni municipalities. Many of you would have seen his social media posts, which got a lot of South Africans talking. And that's our show for this evening. To join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.